Hi there, Miss Sylvia. It's always good to see you.
Welcome, everyone. All right, Tia, looks like it is going live now.
Okay. Welcome, everyone, to our CPOC's March Community Town Hall. My name is Talia Grimmage. It is really, really great to be back with all of you on this beautiful spring day. It was a big surprise for me. You know, I am not a big fan of daylight savings time. I'm sure, like many of you, you know, I am a fan of fallback. I am not a fan of spring forward at all, you know, but today's like today, you know, make it all worth it. So if you were not with us last month, our topic was policing and trauma within the Black community. We talked a little bit about the Tyree Nichols incident in Memphis, and we had an opportunity to spend a little bit of time talking to, we had Rep. Chris Robb with us, we had a representative from Black Men Heal, and we just talked a little bit about how repeated viewings of police trauma and some of these videos continue to cause harm, you know, within the Black community. And just, we talked a little bit about the path forward and how we can work together to change the state of the world. And so if you missed that, it's available on our YouTube channel. You can watch it there, you can stream it, share it with a friend, post it on your social media, but it's there available for you to take a look. Tonight, we have a really great meeting in store for you. I am going to start by introducing our commissioners and some of the staff. CPOC is led by 9 commissioners. We have our chair, which is Jolly Hatchett. Our vice chair is Afroza Hossein. Our commissioners are Hassan Bennett, Benjamin Lerner, Rosara Thomas, John Solomon, Mary Ellis Santiago, Elder Melanie DeBose, and Hakeem P.A. Our commission is led by our interim executive director, Anthony Irachi. And tonight, we have Danny Guys with us, Timothy Perez, Julian Jordan, and Damon Green is on the line, as well as Layla Khalil. And so at this point, I will go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Tim to go ahead and introduce our guests.
Thanks, Leah. Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's having a good night tonight. My name is Tim. I'm one of the policy analysts here at CPOC. Tonight, our guest speakers are going to be Pamela Jenkins from Police Dispatch. She's going to talk about how the police radio handles calls for 911 that are crisis related for behavioral health. And as we also have Lieutenant Victoria Casal, who's the commanding officer of the PPD's new behavioral health unit, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the PPD responses to behavioral health issues in the community. So I believe Lieutenant Casal, I think we're going to go to you first.
I mean, you started off. All right. Let me know if you have any problems hearing me. I'm getting over a cold, but thank you guys for having us here. Like Tim mentioned, I'm the commanding officer for the behavioral health unit. The behavioral health unit is a brand new unit in the Philadelphia Police Department. We've existed since December, so you know, almost 3 months now as a unit. We've done some pilot programs prior to that make up the unit, but this is the first time that we have a behavioral health unit for the department. What it consists of is the police assisted diversion program and our crisis intervention response team. So we call those PAD and CERT, the crisis intervention response teams. I'll start off by talking about CERT a little bit and then maybe move into PAD. So the crisis intervention response teams, our CERT teams, are comprised of 2 police officers and 1 social worker, which we call our clinicians, from Merrickey and Elwyn, which we contract through DBH IDS. And they respond primarily to 911 crisis calls. So mental health calls in the moment, most of the time that are coming in through the 911 system. So they're able to go to these calls with a social worker on hand and help respond to those calls. We've had a lot of success since we've started Since December, they've engaged 229 individuals throughout Philadelphia. We have 4 teams operating right now, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. We keep 2 teams in the north side of the city and 2 teams in the south side of the city and southwest side of the city to kind of distribute and be able to respond to all those calls. We're seeing the most of our calls. While we have them coming in throughout the city, we have the majority of our calls coming in actually from our Northeast division. So they operate just on day work right now. Our hope is to expand. So we'll have teams 7 to 3 and teams that are operating 2 to 10 as well. So we're very excited to have it on board. I think the officers in the field have been utilizing them and calling them when they don't get dispatched through 911 or self-initiate dispatch through 911. They're going to calls because other officers from different districts are calling them and asking for their help. Some of the great things of the social workers from Merrickey and from Elwyn that have been able to help us with are utilizing the mental health delegates while on scene and being able to do a 302 on scene. So we kind of expedite that involuntary committal process instead of having to tell a family member, go down, get paperwork, find transportation to get that paperwork, come back, fill it out. While there's an active crisis going on, we're able to take immediate action. And that's one of the values we have by having a clinician with us. There's also follow-up team component to the CERT teams. So we have 2 separate follow-up teams, one for our Rock South and one for Rock North. And what they do is within 72 hours of the engagement that the officers and the clinician have, they follow up with that individual to make sure that they're connected to appropriate services. So not all the time are they involuntary or helping voluntary commit someone. They're also connecting people to services through these calls and a wide array of services. And once those 72 hours go, if we find that they still need additional services, we work with DBH-IDS to make sure that they have like appropriate case management long-term. So that's a little bit about our CERT program. They also, we piloted it about 1.5 years ago. So 2 teams existed in the city throughout the pilot, and now this is the first time we're existing within the expansion and citywide. The police assisted diversion program has been around as more of a pilot for quite a few years, and we're finally expanding. What police assisted diversion is the second program that falls under the behavioral health unit. What it is diverting away from the criminal justice system and from jail time after point of arrest for crimes that are low level, like nonviolent narcotics crimes. So like a small amount of narcotics, not selling, for prostitution and for retail theft. So as long as that individual doesn't have a warrant, an active warrant that excludes them from the program, or they haven't been through the program 2 times already, they're diverted away and they go through the police assisted diversion program. They work with police assisted diversion officers and our resources through Merrickey to get connected with social services. And so they come in to the police district in the 24th, 25th district for Rock North, if there's a diversion arrest there. And then we're expanding to Rock South sometime in April, and we'll be utilizing the 16th district for that expansion. So we're hoping that in April we'll be citywide for a police assisted diversion. They're operating on both the daytime and the nighttime shift. So we have 2 officers on each shift in each rock for that. And then we have Merrickey there to help set up those connections and those services for the individuals who are going through the diversion. So we're very excited that program's been going on a really long time in East Division, but just available for East Division. And now it'll be available for the entire city, hopefully by April. So we're rolling that out now as well. those are the two programs that we have. We're really excited. All the officers are starting to utilize them, and we think they're unique, and they're the way that many police departments are going right now with co-response and some diversion models. So we're excited to be on the forefront of that in Philadelphia. Tim, I guess kick it back to you.
Yeah,
Ask questions.
but actually, yeah, we do have a few questions regarding both CERT and PAD, looks like. Regarding CERT, I think one of the questions you were wanting to know a little bit more about the training that the teams have to equip them to handle mental health calls better than regular officers might on the street.
Yeah, absolutely. We have Aaron O'Donnell on here as well, who's our CIT coordinator for the city. So Aaron, I don't know, Aaron, can I give that to you? Because you can speak really well on their training. She's muted still. Is she able to unmute or no? Okay. Oh, I think she's still muted.
I think I'm good. Hi, everybody. My name is Aaron. I presented at this, I think, last summer a couple times. So just to give you guys a little bit of a background of what these officers go through. So every officer who is a CERT team member will have, and also Pat as well, also have already gone through my CIT training, which, as a reminder, is a 40-hour training of de-escalation, mental health, and various different things like that. So then officers who are chosen for CERT go through an additional 80 hours of training. They go through just extensions of CIT, kind of like a master type course on CIT, and more resources that are available in the city. We also put the entire unit, the clinicians and the officers, through our reality-based training for an entire week so that they can learn from each other and that they're able to, see different things that happen. And then what the conclusion of the training actually happened was everybody went through our hostage negotiation, or going to be renamed crisis negotiation, for the city of Philadelphia so that they can help out even more with barricade situations and various things. So they were in training for over a whole month before they all hit the street together.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, and we were really excited. That's the first time civilians have gone through the crisis negotiation training in Philadelphia as well. So we were excited to have that large group go through together, and it's a very sought after and good training, because I didn't mention that they do respond to every barricade situation that they're available for. So they're able to help out in negotiation teams if need be.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. The next question is kind of a little bit of a piggyback on that, but aside from having two officers with them as well, what safety measures are put in place to protect the mental health co-responders when they're out operating with CERT?
So I'll talk a little bit. I know Aaron can add to the training of this as well. But well, actually, Aaron, I'll let you speak to the training that they specifically get, learning a little bit more about how policing operates and situational awareness.
So just to start, all of the civilians do wear bulletproof vests. There are some co-responder programs across the country that they do not, but we have chosen to give them vests. We taught them during all of the training, gave them a bunch of various situations where please don't get out of the car unless the officer deems it appropriate, deems it safe. During all of the, reality-based training, we went through a whole bunch of different scenarios where, okay, so this would be something where the officer needs to investigate first, or, make sure that they are able to deem a situation safe before anybody is allowed to talk to anybody. So, they're in the cars, they know how to work the cars as well. They know how to work the radios in case anything does happen. So we just want everybody to be able to go home. So we really thought of a lot of different scenarios to be able to train on together. It was really fun for the clinicians because they even got to, see what it was like from the police officer's perspective. And they had questions and they came up with a lot of really good discussions for that.
And a lot of the clinicians mentioned that in their previous work, they didn't realize that they were putting themselves in these dangerous situations, and it was really eye-opening to them to kind of learn about the safety measures and protocol that we take to keep them safe. But they do all the officers make sure that scene is completely safe before the clinicians engage with anyone.
I remember one of the main conversations that we had with them, was, okay, so where is the most dangerous room in the house? If you're just walking into someone's house, and they all said the living room. And I said, okay, so if you've ever done work in somebody's home, where do you go sit? And they said they go sit in the kitchen, when in reality, that's one of the most dangerous parts of a house because you have access to knives and everything like that. So it's little things that we would taught them along the way.
So one of the other questions coming in the chat is how does the PPD Behavioral Health Unit coordinate with calls for the mobile crisis teams, no police? So I'm assuming they're talking about the civilian DVH responders.
So there, right now we've created with DBH kind of a group that's coming up to kind of figure out the best way, because we're finding some jobs that those mobile teams that are civilians show up on and police show up on, because what'll happen is someone will call for mobile response, so for civilian responders. But in the meantime, someone else on that scene will call 911 and get a CERT team there. So there's some instances where both teams are going. So we're kind of starting to triage this on how to figure out how to make sure the right person is responding to that job. So we're not operating in those silos. So we know exactly if it's needed for police or if it's needed for mobile. But we work really well with our crisis line representatives to see, like, if they have something that they get a call in for and they get to scene and they say, hey, like, there's weapons involved, or maybe there's a threat of violence, even though the call came in for them to respond to, there's certain scenes that they won't be able to. So we think the next best step is, instead of just calling 911, being able to contact us as CERT officers that have this training to be able to respond to those specific calls that they, originally called for mobile crisis. So we're still working through all of it, but I think right now we're working together very well to make sure that the citizens are getting like the most appropriate response to their mental health calls.
When will you have the next crisis response training for civilians?
So through the Department of Behavioral Health, there's always different trainings such as mental health first aid or psychological first aid. Tim, if you could put my email on the chat, if anybody's interested in various different trainings that the Department of Behavioral Health has, I can definitely set people up with that, but we won't necessarily be hosting any more trainings of, with the police officers until we do the next round.
Yeah. The civilians that came through with the police officers, it was because they were our clinicians. So they came through the CIT training and the crisis negotiation with their counterparts in the police department.
Thanks, Danny.
What kind of records are kept regarding nonviolent resolutions to 911 calls compared to 911 calls that are only answered by police?
So we're still working through a lot of that because to be able to capture the amount of calls from the department in Philadelphia as a whole is a really big undertaking. So we work with the DIVIC in order to capture data. What we've really made a point to do from the beginning is to make it a point from the behavioral health unit to be 21st century and getting data and getting it out there as soon as possible. So Danny, I don't know can you put the CERT dashboard up?
Yes, sorry, is it the one with 2 pages or 1 page?
The 2-page one.
Great, give me 1 second.
So just to share, what Danny's going to put up is our dashboard, and our goal is to end up having this be like a forward-facing dashboard where you'd be able to log on to maybe Philly Police or another site and be able to see what the behavioral health programs are doing. So we have one for our CERT engagements, and we have one additionally for PAD. So this is the CERT one. So it's 2 page. We can keep it on the first page, but like some of the important things we're seeing has like the question, like, has force been used? Well, it's going to be a bigger undertaking to compare it to the department as whole, but there's been one job that we've had so far out of 228. CERT engagements, or 229 since the program started. That force has been used. Some of the other interesting things, we asked some qualitative questions of like if the officers, I think it's on the next page actually. Do you believe that the individual would have been arrested if CERT was unavailable? And we said about 8% of those calls, those officers did believe that if CERT wasn't there as another option, that individual would have been arrested. And then one of the really great things about this, and you can see it in the average time on call on the first page, is that they're spending 1 hour and 6 minutes on each call. So it's more about the quality of the encounter than how many they're going to. They have more time than the average patrol officer to respond to these calls and to spend time on scene, actually figuring out what's going on in the individual, what connections they have, what's going on in the house, do they have appropriate resources, instead of just trying to say like, hey, please, you should go get through 2 paperwork and moving on to the next call. So we really like to give them the ability to spend as much time on those calls as possible. And I think a lot of the outcomes we've seen, a lot of it's from the amount of time they're able to spend on this call, in addition to the follow-up that happens from these calls.
Awesome. The next question, and this one may also be good for Pamela, for you to jump in as well on the 911 calling side of it, but someone in the audience is deaf or hard of hearing, and they would love to know how these sorts of calls, what kind of training is the PPD equipped with to handle these calls for crisis assistance for individuals that are hard of hearing. I guess for callers and for people that are also in crisis that may be deaf or hard of hearing.
So I can't speak to the actual like receiving of the call for a 911, but I know from our side, it was very selective from our chain of command on who they chose for these jobs as the officers. So all of our officers are very versatile and trained, whether it's language, experience, background. So I know we do have one officer who does know American Sign Language. So if we were dispatched that call, we would be able to say like, hey, we're going to send the appropriate team to that call.
Pamela, do you want to add anything about just on 911 side of that?
Well, usually when a 911 call comes in concerning a deaf caller, it's usually from a second party. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's usually from a second party.
Okay.
And also, Tim, in the mental health script that is asked on every 911 call, there is a question that says, would making communication with this person difficult? So that could give officers the identification beforehand that there is someone who is deaf, hard of hearing, so that they can, prepare as they're on their way to the call.
Okay. Thanks, Aaron. What are the criteria for what calls go to non-police mobile crisis versus going to police and CERT?
I don't know if Aaron or Pamela want to take that from.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
So it's a couple different things. It could be whether or not the individual feels comfortable calling police. It could be, if they only know about the civilian mobile teams, maybe they don't even know that the mobile teams exist. We in the Department of Behavioral Health, we experience that a lot, that, everybody just calls police. Maybe they didn't even know the mobile teams existed. There are plenty of jobs, CERT, regular CERT, CIT, where the mobile teams and the CIT trained officers are both on scene together. So it's really just of the discretion of the individual. We have the effective communication with 911 on the Philadelphia Police website, which really explains a lot of, who to call when. And I just think it's really up to case by case basis of what individuals know. But I also think that since 988 has rolled out, which anybody who does not know, 988 is the national mental health number. So if you dial 988, it goes to our crisis line, just like 911 for police. So I really think it's a case by case basis of a person's comfortability.
Next question, just wants to know how long the program's been around.
Like the CERT program?
Yes.
CERT's been around since December under the behavioral health unit. So, but it's been around about 2 years if you include the pilot, which was just 2 teams in Central and 2 teams in East, and it was 1 person, 1 officer and 1 clinician. So that was our pilot. It was about 1.5 years, and then we rolled it into the behavioral health unit where where there was supervision specifically for CERT and for PAD. PAD's been around a little bit longer, quite a few years in the pilot program just in East. So it'll only be, it's only been available to Rock North for, a few months, and then it'll be available citywide in April.
Someone wants to know if you are currently looking for more ASL crisis responders or any bilingual crisis responders.
So that would all be really through the Department of Behavioral Health or the individual agencies. So they always will post, Marikey and Elwyn are the agencies we work with. But as far as, the crisis mobile teams, they are through, the various agencies, Catch, Paths, JFK. So, you can look for, listings there.
Do you think that this program will morph into doing prevention work by visiting people who had previously been the recipients of CERT to see if they're receiving aftercare?
So that's what we're doing now. So that's what those follow-up teams that we have, they visit and they call within 72 hours after. And sometimes it takes about a week, but we do make sure that we have a contact with the individual that we engaged with to make sure that they have appropriate resources and services. And we found that some people end up kind of in our system for a lot longer because they might be repeat callers to 911. So we make sure we're checking in on them. So we have quite a few people that, we deal with frequently as well.
And that also doesn't just go for follow-up for jobs that CERT has been on. If there's an officer who is working 4 to 12 or last out shift, then they can send the information over to CERT and say, hey, I had this job. Can you please send somebody to check up on this individual? And then, that's another way that the follow-up teams can function.
Yeah, we get while we primarily respond to those crisis in the moment calls, we do get a lot of referrals from the districts of people that walk in a lot or that they frequently see, that frequently call into the districts, from our dignitary protection unit that deals with people that might be reaching out to dignitaries that come into them through threats, but really it's mental health. We work with radio, who for all those people that are calling daily and they're able to see, to make sure that we get appropriate services out to them, because we want to stop that cycle of calling 911. And we're hoping that we'll have some data in the future that says that the interventions from the CERT team were able to provide resources and stop some of those frequent callers to 911.
Okay. So it looks like somebody asked back when the data was up on the screen, Danny, if you want to flash it back. But other 92% of responses that said none would have been arrested. Why weren't more of these calls routed to mobile crisis?
I mean, it all depends on what that call actually came in for. That number is qualitative. So that is the officer saying, based on my experience on that scene, that's what I'm thinking. So that's not a quantitative number, but it all depends on what that individual wanted, what the call came in for. If the call came in as any sort of violent or priority, it wouldn't have been able to be routed to a mobile crisis team because the mobile crisis team wouldn't be able to respond based on their protocol. So it could be a number of reasons why that wouldn't have gone there.
Please compare the numbers of behavioral health calls responded to by CERT versus the numbers for CIT.
Like the numbers by a CIT officer. I guess we don't know who's asking this.
I think what they were asking is just like CERT versus the typical CIT officers.
Do you want to explain that? Yeah.
So we have over 3,000 CIT officers in the city right now. We have over about 75% of patrol trained. So when there is when there's a job that is tagged through our mental health script as a CIT or CERT job, the CERT teams, if they are already on a job, they will, some of the CIT officers will go. We don't necessarily have data of, a CIT officer versus the CERT. We keep track of the CERT data specifically because it is such a smaller program. It's a lot easier to, maneuver. But, ever since the mental health script has been put into place in November of 2020, it really is allowing us better communication for the CIT officers to be able to go to jobs where there is a crisis situation. I hope that answered the question. So we don't have exact numbers of that. I think what the person may have been asking is under follow-up status, it says CIT2. They're just the follow-up teams. It could have just been a typo, but those are just our follow-up teams who follow up with the individuals.
Yeah, it's our internal way of tagging if they've made an attempt for their follow-up and been successful, and if they've made an attempt or been unsuccessful, and if they've made an attempt and been successful in connecting that person.
Okay. Have you noticed since the BHU's been rolled out with permanent CERT teams, have you noticed a difference in how individuals on the street may be reacting to officers, uniformed police officers responding to calls?
I mean, I can't speak for really a whole around the city, but I can speak for what I see when my officers specifically respond to a call with their clinician counterpart. So, I mean, we do get a much different response when, they get onto a scene and they're able to explain like, hey, I'm a crisis officer. This is specifically what I do. Like, I'm here to help you. And I have a social worker with me to help you. And we feel like a lot of that time, depending on what the situation is, quells what's going on. A lot of the times they deal better with the clinician. And that's a good way, into that job. We are working on softer uniforms as well. They already have pretty much unmarked vehicles. So when they show up, they're showing up in a vehicle that it's just white and it says Crisis Intervention Response Team on it. That's all it says. We're slowly kind of get a softer uniform for them to have the presence of like, we're here as a different resource to add to whatever is going on. And I mean, we've gotten positive feedback from the majority of citizens we see on calls.
Awesome. So we have a few pad related questions as well, and I'll take a couple of those. So the first question is, if someone is arrested, can they request police assisted diversion, or will they automatically be referred based on the nature of the offense?
It's based on the nature of the offense. So it's only those 3 offenses. So it's the low-level narcotics, prostitution, and retail theft. As long as they meet the qualifiers for that, they can be diverted into the PAD program, but they can't request it. Now, if we're rolling out and we're getting the training citywide, so it's taking a while to get all 6,000 officers in the police department trained to say, hey, when you arrest someone, you have these options to divert them. So we're definitely working through that now. So it's something we want to make everyone aware of. So if anyone potentially got into that situation, they could say like, hey, I want to be diverted, but we're hoping all the officers know what those qualifying offenses are and we're diverting appropriately. And we get reports that say, if we're not utilizing it, if someone was arrested during an hour that they were potentially able to go through diversion, we get those reports. So we're able to follow up and say like, hey, why did this happen? Like, why didn't they come through diversion?
Awesome. Like a side question, when it comes to retail theft, is there like a dollar amount that's associated with if you're eligible for PAD or not?
We don't have a dollar amount to it right now. We haven't run into the issue of like a large amount of retail for PAD.
Thank you. The next question looks like, if someone is referred to PAD, what does the process look like for them?
So PAD, I actually didn't touch on this earlier. PAD has kind of two systems as well. PAD has social referrals in addition to the arresting diversion process. So someone can also, and the officers on the street utilize this a lot, especially in East Division, can also say like, hey, I need help. And police officers are able to bring them to the PAD office, which right now is 709 East Allegheny, and say this person needs help, whether it's food assistance, whether it's shelter, it's an ID, or it's substance use treatment. There's a wide array of things they can help them with, but it kind of helps us as police not be a one-stop shop for everything. And we can lean on our partners that are experts in these areas and bring people over to there. So they could, I think the question was like about being referred, because I might have went on a tangent about that, right?
Yeah. So what does the process look like for someone that has been referred?
So if they get referred through arrest diversions, they come, if they're in the north side of the city, they get brought into the 24th, 25th police district. They meet within a PAD officer, do intake, which is also, we get a lot of PAD data through this. And then they do an assessment with the Marikey staff based on what they need and what they're looking for. So we work with a number of different programs. So I've been mentioning Marikey a lot, but for PAD, we also work with ODAT. We work with PATH for prostitution. We solely work with Salvation Army. So there's different paths based on where that person lives in the city and the type of treatment that they need. So they'll sit down with the officer and then they'll do an assessment with the provider in order to find out what system we need to divert them through.
Awesome. And so I know you mentioned earlier that you can go through the program twice, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And what happens the third time?
So the third time you'd be arrested if you went through the program 2 times already.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. The next question we have is, how is PPD planning on measuring the success of the PAD program?
So similarly, what we're hoping is, we've just started like into the 21st century of trying to really be rich with getting this data on the forefront. What we want to see with PAD is those people with those low level offenses getting diverted away from the criminal justice system and going into the appropriate resources. And some of the success measures that we're going to be able to track moving forward is the fact that we don't see them coming back into our criminal justice system, right? We're not interfacing with them again in a manner where they're being arrested or facing the criminal justice system. That our next interfaces are, oh, I was able to follow up and go through the program, or reaching back out to us before it gets to that point as far as a social referral and say, hey, I might have run into some trouble, but I'm ready to get some help again before we get back to some place that's like a point of arrest.
Okay. And we just got another question. If an offender drops out or doesn't finish the program, do they get arrested? Are they allowed back in? How does that work?
So police assisted diversion is a little bit different than some places like AMP court and stuff like that, where with PAD, we're not forcing people through the program. A warrant's not dropped if they don't go through it. So that's why there's kind of that 3-strike thing, because we know based on situations and substance use and stuff that this might not work the day, right? The day that we arrested you might not, and we get you referred to that program, you can leave on your own volition to there. But some of the stuff we've realized is that, and we're still tracking this, so hopefully in the future we'll have good metrics on it, but that these people will, and these individuals will come back in the future, and we do see that. So they don't get rearrested for not following through.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Looks like we got another question that just came in. Can you talk a little bit about any data that's collected around recidivism rates and examples where people are diverted to other resources than the criminal justice system?
Yeah, so I mean, PAD is the example of being diverted anywhere besides the criminal justice system. So there, a lot of it is heavy on substance use. A lot of the people that and individuals that we have come through East Division. But there's a bunch of different programs we have. I'm trying to see if I have the data in front of me on recidivism, and I don't know that I do. But the goal is that we have a forward-facing document in the future that we're able to just present on that site. So I can get that data, and if you guys want to drop my information in the chat too, because we have information on how many people on recidivism and how many people that we have coming back through the program. Like, there's not many people that we see at that third strike moment. So once we see them, we don't usually see them after that a lot.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Did you have any more questions, Tim, on the other end? Oh, it looks like Danny has dropped your email in the chat if anyone has any additional questions related to anything that we are talking about this evening. Did you have any other questions from the previous topic, Tim?
Yeah, looks like we did have a few more CERT questions as well. One of them, someone wanted to know what percentage of behavioral health calls tend to pose threats of violence.
We definitely don't have that yet, because so I guess is it what percentage of behavioral health calls that come to us pose violence? I might be able to get, but in general, I mean, the city gets a lot of calls, so the CERT units might not be able to get every behavioral health call, you know, out there. I don't have.
So I think I'm going to take this a little bit of a different way than a way I think it was asked. So some, crisis in general can always be a very, hard topic. And when people are, have police coming to their home, any job, honestly, that is crisis could be violent. So it's really hard to grasp if, someone is screaming when we get there and then, de-escalating them. So it's just hard to, keep track of a lot of that just because our officers are so good at talking people down. So they usually will take a really rough situation and calm it down. So, technically even yelling at somebody could be seen as violence.
Yeah. And we do have them track if there was violence there, but it would be against them. So like we've had one injured officer, and that was out of all these calls, and we've had two at this point in time, and one was like contamination from being spit at. But that's kind of all I have for the violence piece, because it is a difficult one.
Yeah, that does sound difficult. I do remember, I think when Danny had it up on the screen, I think it said only 2 uses of force in all 217 calls.
So we have I think 1 or 2 use of force, and 2 injuries, and they were to officers. So we're about equal as force used against individuals and force used against officers with that.
That's
I have a question. So when there are crisis or CERT calls, are they logged or entered into like the premise history for a specific address? And the reason I'm asking is because I'm wondering if someone were to call 911 or a neighbor or something and it wasn't a crisis call, how would those officers know that there had been some mental health history at that address before they get there?
Aaron, I saw you starting. So
Well, I'm going to take one part of it. You can take the other part you knew you were going to go to. So with, I had brought this to this group last time I spoke. Individuals are able to register through radio if there is an individual who has a seizure condition, autism, any type of diagnosis. I'm sorry, my dog is walking around. They are able to register for 2 years if they have any of those types of diagnoses, and they would like officers to know that before they go to the jobs. That is a voluntary, that's a voluntary registration. However, officers are able to go over the air, and Lieutenant Cassell can, ask this to see if how many 911 calls have been to that address in a certain amount of time.
Mhm. And we've done it with a few certain individuals too, that we get frequent calls. We've gone and we've added to the premise history some information. It's especially true for those frequent callers that might be calling like 200 plus times a year that we're dealing with. So we work with radio to add some premise history information there as well. It's kind of on a case by case basis at this point. And then a lot of the times I don't think we touched on this, but based on the call taker and the script coming in, those calls are tagged for CIT cert officers. So it'll be denoted on the actual 911 call for those calls coming in based on what happened with the call taker, that we should have a CIT or a cert officer responding to that call if available.
Someone in the chat asked, what are the other top 10 metro cities doing like this? And are they having success?
Yeah, a number of cities have co-responder programs. It looks different everywhere a little bit. Like Denver has the STAR program, which is a paramedic and a social worker. LAPD's mental health unit I think they're on 40 years or something now.
30 years.
They're kind of the first in the game, and they have a really extensive team. What we see is a lot of places have them. Not a lot of places, I think, have as large as what we're trying to create. A lot of these smaller departments, you'll maybe have like one co-responder available and one officer to respond to these calls. I think we're trying to build a fairly comprehensive program between us and radio and PCL and mobile crisis for the city. Erin, do you have anything for that as well?
Other than LAPD, there is not many police departments in the country that have an actual behavioral health unit just for this basis. So with some of the top 10 cities, what they will be doing and what they have done previously is we'll have, an officer will be a co-responder one day and then just, be on their normal patrol that like other days. So they'll have it only available specific days of the week. So everything looks a little different. I would say that the city that we look the most similar to would be Houston, but even then we do have some differences.
So I think we're really grateful that we've been able to build this unit and really like choose these officers and appropriate people for these positions. So it's not a different officer every day. We have officers that are really building relationships with their co-responder partners, which helps us moving forward on these crisis calls.
Someone else asked about for a person who is deaf or hard of hearing. I think they wanted some more explanation on premise history and how they can do that for themselves each year.
So if I don't know if you put the 911 effective communication, if somebody could put that maybe in the chat, I can send it to link. Within there is the premise history registration form.
Erin,
So-
if you can send it to me in the chat, I can share with everybody.
Okay, I'll do that right now. Let me explain first. So you can send it, you can fill out the form and then, it gets sent straight to radio, who puts it in the premise history. So I'm going to send Danny the effective communication with 911, and it is within there. It's in a couple different languages right now, and we are expanding it to have even more.
Looks like somebody asked, why wasn't consortium called for Walter Rawlis? Many previous premise calls and history of treatment.
So consortium is in like the mobile crisis team, right? So this is, I mean, Walter Wallace is kind of what this program grew out of, right? The necessity for police response with the clinician in these types of situations, because I mean, I don't want to speak specifically to what happened because I wasn't there. I wasn't a part of that or part of the radio calls for that. But my outlook on it would be that because of the violence, whether it's called with a weapon or violent history or what, that the mobile crisis teams have their protocol and what they can and can't respond to. And some of them has to do with the call taker and what's being said, and they might not be able to respond to those calls based on that. And that's why we find that those CERT units are good in between.
Okay. Looks like another question we have. Oh, sorry, the chat just moved. What is the future of the CERT program, and what is the 5-year plan, so to speak?
So our long-term goals, and these are kind of like our wish lists, is that we get to expand to night work as soon as possible. We have the clinicians available and ready to do so. So once we get the officers and supervisors, we can roll out to night work. We also, at this time, we don't have transportation, so we rely on districts to transport for us because we do have the clinicians sitting in the backseat of the car, and they're not caged vehicles. So we can't, if we 302 someone, involuntary commit them, we can't have them in the backseat of those cars. So we rely heavily on those districts to still help us with transportation. We want to make it so that we can kind of in-house things. We can respond to those calls. We can also transport and, expedite that transport, not waiting on anyone when we're in those crisis situations. For PAD, it's to roll out citywide and to have it being a resource that's being used citywide. So that's kind of our immediate goal that we want to see. We're also looking at some, what other places like LAPD have been able to expand their programs to. They have a more extensive case management, which is something that we're seeing more and more of these individuals that are coming, in contact with us over and over again. And we really are doing some more case management instead of crisis response at that time. So maybe building something that into that long term as well. So I think there's definitely a lot of potential for this unit, moving forward.
Thank you for answering that. I think that might have been our last question from the chat so far.
We have one last question in chat, and then I think we're going to open up for public comment. I'll let Talia lead that. But first, before we do that, Celia, we had a question that said, police violence is often based on racism. What are you doing to address the issue of racism, especially in the CIRT unit?
That's a very tricky one. I think we could all say, but we, like I mentioned before, made sure that our unit represents individuals from all walks of life, from all socioeconomic stances, from all genders. So I think, and the same goes for our clinicians as well. So I think when we look at it that way, our first step in this is that we've made a unit that looks and feels like we represent our city. And then we've made sure that we've been able to deploy to all divisions in the city. so that we're just not in one place or the other, that we're in Southwest Philadelphia, that we're in South Philadelphia, that we're additionally in East and Northeast, so that we're touching and making this really a citywide program that we can address everyone's needs no matter where they're at.
Thank you. Before we go ahead and move on to our public comment section, I just wanted to invite Ms. Jenkins, who's joined us from 911 Dispatch. I just wanted to give you an opportunity, if you'd like to maybe talk a little bit about what it's like for you working as a dispatcher. What is it like to handle some of these calls, or anything you'd like to share with us about your role?
Everyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hear me? It's very stressful and very emotional, but we are trained to handle these calls. Trained very well to handle these calls.
Is there something about your job that you like the most? You know, what keeps you coming back every day? I know that you said it's stressful, but you know, you have to agree with and love the work that you do. So what is it that keeps you involved?
Just interacting with the public. I love interacting with the public.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Ms. Jenkins. At this time, we are going to move into our public comment section. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Any community members that are wishing to speak, we just ask that you give your name and maybe your what police district you are from. We ask, if possible, that you keep your camera on so that we can see you and engage with you. And if for some reason you're not comfortable doing that and you would prefer to ask a question or give a comment anonymously, we ask that you type that in the chat and we can read it for you. Or if at the end of this you think of something that you want to say or a question you want to ask after this town hall, you can email your questions or comments to CPOC at phila.gov. So at this point, we'll open the floor for comments. If anybody wants to ask a follow-up question to something that was asked earlier, please feel free. If any of our commissioners have a comment that they'd like to give, now is the time to do so. So please, anyone wishing to speak, just use the raise your hand feature and we will call on you. I see Ms. Rosa has her hand up, Dani.
Great, let me unmute you, Rosa, 1 second.
Good evening. Sorry I was a little late. I am Commissioner Rosaura Torres Thomas, and I wanted to thank the 2 police officers for sharing this great information. Now, I do hope that this does work out, because as we know, if you go on the L, you'll see a lot of mental health patients there. There is so much that is taking place on our L. I think it's great. I mean, it's sad because, you know, no one wants to see their loved ones being hurt. And sometimes, you know, it has happened in the past that our police officers can be just a little bit aggressive. But I am hoping that it does work out. I am familiar with some procedures with the police department, and I am familiar with dispatch, and I think dispatch is great. I have some friends that are dispatchers. One became a police officer, and one is still at the airport. So I just want to thank you for coming and to sharing this with our community. Our community wants to know what we are doing as commissioners to continue forward to help our community in regards to what we were assigned to do. So ladies, thank you so much for coming, and thank you for sharing all this information with us.
Thanks for having us.
Yep.
Susan, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Hold on right now. Susan, if you want to, oh, you're still muted, Susan. Oh, hold on, sorry, I clicked when you clicked.
Okay,
There you go. We can hear you.
fine. I think I read in the Inquirer in one of the articles, but I'm not sure that's where it was. But I did see a graph saying that there was a disparity in response times. I don't know if it was for CIT officers or CERT. between areas that had high population of Black and brown citizens versus areas that had more Caucasians? Where would those statistics be and what's being done about that?
I don't know that those are specific CIT or CERT statistics. Because I mean, we don't have any statistics specifically from CIT or CERT on that. So I don't, we'd have to see the article and see what specifically you're talking about. Because I don't know the article either.
All right, I'm gonna send it, I'll get it, the statistics, and send it in.
Thank you. If you want to shoot it to our general email, we can pass it along, or just so you know, we already put the both Aaron's and Victoria's emails in the chat. So feel free to do it directly to them or send it to us.
Okay, thanks.
Stephen, I'm gonna unmute you right now. Oop. Looks like you're still on mute, Stephen. Great, looks like you're on.
Hi, thanks very much for the presentation and the information provided. A follow-up that I think is really important is to understand a little more about what the rationale for the CERT program is, especially because around the country there are increasing numbers of civilian-based behavioral health crisis response units. And I think the key issue there is that police and mental health, behavioral health providers are finding that while there are always concerns about the potential for violent interactions, in fact, they're pretty few and far between. And Albuquerque, for example, has recently started, I forget, over the last 3 or 4 months or so, doing an entirely civilian-based behavioral health response. And in fact, their numbers have skyrocketed in terms of the business they do, if you will. But in fact, the amount of violent calls where police needed to be on hand, and they responded, the civilian corps asked for that backup, is actually under 1%. So it seems to me that the issue that some of us are concerned about with regard to the percentage of calls that truly relate to violence is an extremely important question, because the rationale, as I understand it, for CIT and for CERT is to protect police and other people on the scene to make sure that everybody's safe. But in fact, when there is minimal threat to that for that kind of violence, then we should be going to civilianized responses.
I'll take that. I'm sorry, are you done?
I'm finished. I'm just trying to understand what the rationale for your program is versus some other programs around the country. And you mentioned Denver, and of course that's a civilianized program.
So in the city of Philadelphia, we have had our civilian mobile teams for over 50 years. The civilian mobile teams sometimes will get calls where they will say, we can't go to this call. We need police to go to this call. And within Philadelphia, we have had crisis intervention in our city since 2007. It was, it's a nationwide program that trains officers. So the rationale of having it is, like you said, sir, safety of everybody. Now, a lot of times people may not even be aware that there are just civilian mobile teams, but they know that if they need help, they can call 911. And help will come. So we have a really good relationship with our crisis line because, there are times where maybe a civilian response is better or vice versa. There are times where calls come into the crisis line and people will, ask for just the civilian mobile teams when in reality, it's more of a police response. And, one instance could be suicidal callers where, somebody may have a weapon or, they're talking to somebody on the suicide hotline. Police have to go in order to secure the safety.
Mhm.
So,
But how do the numbers stack up between, say, CIT, which I've seen quantified as something like 1,200 calls a week versus CERT, which is what, 200 something calls over, I didn't get the period involved.
So
229 calls over what period?
that is over 3 months, sir.
3 months.
So
That's a pretty astounding disparity.
So the reason for that being is even though there may be 1,200 CIT calls a week, those officers may only be on those jobs a couple minutes, at most maybe an hour, all varying different times. With our CERT teams, the officers are able to be on scene and really go through the entire process with all of the individuals. Do you need case management? How can we help you in this situation? Where officers who are in patrol don't necessarily have as much time. And there are some times when the jobs are, marked as CIT CERT where they can be redeemed within a couple minutes, and some that will take longer. I think Lieutenant Kissel can speak to this. I think our longest running job right now for CERT is 7 hours.
Yeah, we have some very long jobs, especially when dealing with some negotiations with suicidal individuals. And to one of Aaron's points, those CIT calls, you have CIT officers available on every shift at this point of time, every day of the week. Right now, our CERT data is coming from one shift, 5 days a week out of 3 months. So our goal in a dream world, we would love to have CERT officers on every single shift, right? 7 days a week, but we just started. So that's where we're learning to crawl then walk, then hopefully run in the future and be 24/7.
But you haven't mentioned the mobile crisis units, and I'm trying still, and I'm not going to belabor this any further, but the question is what the rationale is for police presence. And
So
I'm not sure that you've answered that question.
So safety. So like I said, with suicidal callers, they could have weapons on scene and there are plenty of times where our civilian mobile teams will, not feel safe going to a dispatch. They can deny a dispatch and then hand it off to officers. So, that's really where we come from. That's one part of it.
Thank you, Stephen, for all your comments. We're going to move on to the next person, just in the interest of time and getting to people. Looks like we have somebody calling in from an iPhone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I came late too. You have a mobile team. Are these people already been trained and get ready to go out and do this second responder?
Yes.
Okay. So they are basically going to be like second responders.
So the civilian mobile teams. So the civilian mobile teams can technically be first responders if they are requested through the crisis line, which is 988. It all depends. Like I said before, they are, if it's a mental health crisis where the call comes in through the suicide hotline, they can be the first ones on scene.
Well, are these responders going to be like licensed to carry and They have to
Oh.
drive their own vehicles, or how do they connect with the
Well, like I
police?
said, so the civilian mobile teams have been around for about 50 years. Those are the strictly just mental health teams, but the clinicians who ride around with the officers, like I said, they wear bulletproof vests and they ride around with the armed police officers.
So what you guys are recruited? Is that what you're doing? Are you recruiting?
Recruiting? No, not at the moment, ma'am.
Okay, so you have these people already in place.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you said the new number for this mental health illness is like 811?
988.
Oh, 988. Okay.
Great. Were those all your questions?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sylvia,
welcome.
we're gonna unmute you now.
First of all, officers Victoria and Aaron, sounds like you're doing a really good
I'm
job.
a civilian. I just need to tell everybody that I'm a civilian, but thank you.
Oh, okay.
We liked it. She's part of our team for sure, though.
Hey, you're doing a good job, and I'm really glad to hear about the work that both of the units are doing. And I want to have a follow-up question to what I asked earlier about racism. You know, we all know, we hear case after case, not just Philadelphia, but all over the country, where police officers have injured or killed someone because they were afraid for their life. And almost always, not always, but almost always, it's a white officer with a black person. And so I don't know how much training can help that. I think maybe it has to be more with the hiring, that you do an extensive intake, that to look for hidden racism that's going to result in someone saying, I'm afraid for my life, and pulling their gun and shooting someone. You know, what are you doing about that?
So I can't speak to the police department as a whole as far as like our recruiting. I can speak to the behavioral health unit. And one example I want to give, because you mentioned like people being fearful of their life and how to deal with those situations and maybe making decisions based on that. When we're talking about police officers, one of our goals is to get the police officers on the street to utilize the CERT program before it gets to that point in time. So we even got a call at the end of the day today as a sergeant actually saying, you know, I have a male, he's in a mental health crisis, he's in a hallway, he's trying to gain access to the roof. If we have to take him out of here, I don't think it's going to be pretty. And these are things I say, like, that's the call I want. Like, I want us to go to that call and spend 3 hours in that hallway to get that individual to come down with us. So like, I think from our standpoint, a lot of the training is to make it so the patrol officers don't need to know everything, but they need to know that they have this really rich resource available to them, whether it's the CERT officers or the CERT civilians that they can utilize, that are going to be able to respond in real time to these crisis situations.
And that's great. And, you know, de-escalation, if hopefully the officers know how, and if not, that they get backup from people like you. But I'm thinking of, you know, the South Carolina church where an armed young white man, you know, killed all those black parishioners, and he was taken into custody without any violence. And yet there have been black people who weren't doing anything violent, reached for a cell phone and got shot and killed. There's some racism that's deep in some of us that is very dangerous when you're a police officer with a gun. And I'm just concerned with police departments all over the country. This is not being dealt with in the serious way it needs to be.
Thank you for your comments, Sylvia. We really appreciate them. I'm going to move on to the next question. It looks like we have Lynette.
Danny, real quick, I would just add in, just for anyone, you know, if anyone feels that they have had a, you know, unfavorable interaction with the CERT officer or any police officer, you know, you always have the option to file a complaint with the Internal Affairs Division, or you can contact us and, talk to us about your experience and, what occurred, and we can file a complaint for you.
I will put our website in the chat in just a moment. Nina?
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Oh, hi, good evening. I guess my question is for Aaron, because I caught the last end of it. Can you repeat how someone can register somebody or register an address for crisis?
Sure, no problem. In the chat, Danny did put the filled out the form of the guide in the Philadelphia guidelines. It starts on page 7. So it is a 2-page form where you can register just about anything. You can register if someone's vet status, you can register if an individual has autism, if they have seizures. It is all voluntary. So once that form is filled out, it gets sent to police radio, and then it is put onto a premise history. The forms are good for 2 years. So say you want to continue to keep registering, you would just have to do it every 2 years.
And it can
So
be,
go ahead.
so I was gonna say it could be used for a number of things, like even if you have someone in your house who has dementia.
Yes.
And stuff like that. So it's really good to utilize.
So how are these forms accessible to the community? Like, where do people find these forms at?
They're on the web, the link that Danny just put in the chat. It's on the Philadelphia Police website.
So basically, this is kind of like a word of mouth thing. Like, how is this form, this registration process being put out to the community? Now, I know that we're on this form right now. However, if we want people to register because this is, such an important program, are they being hand delivered to community organizations? Are the psychiatric facilities getting these forms? Are they being given to clients during the discharge process?
So I cannot speak for every agency in the city of Philadelphia, but I do know that all of the crisis centers, all 5 of them, including the children's one, they do educate everybody who comes through there about these forms. Outpatient and other treatment facilities, it is all a case-by-case basis of what they feel comfortable sharing with their clients. But I push these a lot through the crisis, the CRC, so the crisis response centers. So they do make people aware in case they would like to register.
Okay, well, as a person who works in a CRC, I've never seen this form.
Please let me know which CRC you were in. My email is in the chat.
Yeah, I definitely will. I worked at all of them. So how long has this form been presented to CRCs?
I've been presenting it for at least 3 years.
Interesting. Thank you. I'll reach out.
And Ms. Lynette, at the end of each of our community meetings, we always send a follow-up message to our email list, and anyone that's attended, we'll attach the premise history form when we send out our thank you and follow up with everyone. And we will also be posting it on our social media just to raise awareness about premise history and let people know how they can register their address if they choose to.
Someone asked in the chat, just since we're on this subject, can community-based organizations request training on these forms? If yes, from who?
I mean, I would love to, if any, and it's not necessarily training. I mean, I could sit with anybody and explain the forms. It would take me only a couple minutes. So, if anybody, if they have, representatives, I can, talk to them about it, but it's not necessarily training. It's just the forms are pretty straightforward.
Great. I'll put your email in the chat. Hassan, you had one of our commissioners, Hassan, you had your hand raised? I can unmute you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for your presentation. My question is, the last time we were on the Zoom, we had 12 complaints. Can we get an update on where those complaints are at as far as CPOC is concerned?
Sure. I believe that all of them have been referred. So those are just 12 referred complaints, Hassan. So we don't have an update from ID. They're sort of in their next step. So anytime somebody submits a complaint to us, we take in their complaint, we give them, we take an interview of what happened, get the sort of circumstances, and then we submit a referral to internal affairs. It typically takes about 2 to 3 weeks for internal affairs to reach out to them for interviews. So I don't know that we would have any specific update. I don't have the exact numbers. I know Anthony was originally just giving numbers at the commissioners meeting.
It was 12 last meeting, and a meeting before it was 16.
Those are just like how many were intake each month. So we don't have the completed for March, since we have a few more days of March left, but we'll give those numbers at our commissioners meeting. But if you, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but in the future, we can make sure that we have all the, just like where we're at in terms of year to date. I don't know if any of the staff who are on the call who have access to civil, if they can just look up how many we've taken in so far this March. We can give an update.
While they're giving that update, are those the only steps we took with those complaints, is interviewing and the complainant?
So some, I don't have the stats on how many of them are being monitored, but it is possible that maybe a few of them are being monitored. As our auditing and monitoring unit is still in development, and we don't have a full capacity staff for auditor monitors yet, we are not at the point where we're monitoring every single complaint case. So if cases are being monitored, it's probably only like 1 or 2 of them. It's probably not all 12 of them yet, but that is something that is a long-term goal of ours.
Thank you. And for the analysts on the in the Zoom currently, what is the overall view? I heard a lot of questions in this Zoom about response time, about actions regarding use of deadly force. Do we have any update with that where we can share with the community?
I don't believe we do. Talia, do you know?
No, I'm sorry, Hassan, can you repeat the last part of your question?
UFRB, if we have any, I think, updates.
Update on trainings with deadly force, how much deadly force has happened, as well as any analysts we see as far as police misconduct overall.
We don't have any updates about that specifically. We can certainly, prepare and put something together if we'd like to, give a presentation to the community on what our process is around that for next time.
That said, I don't know if
hold on, Danny, please. I would like to say, when we do these Zoom meetings, when we do present to the community, as we've heard for the last 3 months, this is what the community wants to hear. So can we ensure that we add this when we speak with the community, when we address the community, when we hear from them? Can we make sure we add these things as well as what we're doing moving forward as CPOC? What stage we are as CPOC, because it seems like a lot of the community members do not know where we're at. So can we keep the community members informed in light of our obligation to transparency?
Absolutely. We can get together and we can discuss maybe if we want to create a specific format where every meeting there's a couple of topics that we hit each meeting where we say, this is where we are with this is where we are with that, just so we can keep the community informed. Just to be transparent, obviously there may not be an update, every meeting. Sometimes investigations or different things take time, but we can certainly make sure that it is a common practice for us to at least address a few core topics, that the commissioners think it's important for us to address.
I have another question. Do we have any officers that have more than one complaint?
We are not at a place where we have access to all of PPD's data to be able to accurately give that information yet. Once our case management system is up and connected to PPD's, when that rollout is finished, we'll be able to give that as a regular complaint, but we don't have any right now. Our case management system is only complaints that come in through us, and we don't have any that came up flagged. But that is, of course, not the whole picture, because we only get like probably a 10th or a 5th of how many complaints come in. And just to go back to your other question, just so you know, and the community knows, CPOC will be releasing an annual report, which will have some information on officer-involved shootings. And we're expected to hopefully put that out at the end of this week, so people can look out for that. Did you have other comments, Hassan?
Yes. How long will it be until CPOC has that access?
I think we can talk about it a little more offline, but just ultimately we'll need some more staff on hand, and one of which is the general counsel. Once some of those hires are made, we'll be able to, I think, get a lot more of that access. We're just not, we don't have the capacity yet to bring it on right now, but it is something that's clearly very important and an important goal for us.
In light of transparency, the general counsel, we have 2 more interviews for the first round of interviews, and then we'll go on the second round, just so the community knows how close we are to hiring, not general counsel, I'm sorry, let me take a step back. As far as executive director is concerned, we have conducted 3 interviews so far. It's in the first round. We have 2 more interviews before we go on to the next round of interviews. I don't know if anybody who's in the ED committee with myself would like to chime in, but we do not have long. That time frame, I can't give you an exact time frame on what it would be, but we do not have long before ED will be assigned to CPOC. So I thank everybody on the Zoom, as well as the community, for being patient with us. This is something new. We are going through a transitional phase. So I thank you all for being patient with us. And if you guys have any input on where you would like to see CPOC, things you would like to see CPOC do for you or for your community as a whole, this is a time. This is a time you do that. I ask you to share with the community leaders as well as your neighbors about these meetings. When you find out about these meetings, this was a great turnout tonight. I expect it to grow as we go on. We're in a large city. So when we look at the people in this Zoom right now, it's a small reflection of what the city is as a whole. So once again, I thank you all for coming on. Thank you, Danny. Thank all the CPOC staff as well as those that have presented today.
Thanks, Hassan.
And I'll just add in just to anyone, if you're interested in learning more about, some of the hirings and things that Hassan mentioned, the Commissioner's Public Meeting is always the first Tuesday of every month. We welcome your attendance and your input. You're always able to send us any comments ahead of the meeting or questions you may have so that we are prepared for you or if you'd like to speak. The next meeting will be April 4th. I believe it will be virtual, and there'll be some information coming out about that. So if you'd like to attend, we would love to have you.
We'll include that in our thank you email that we will send out later this week. I think we have time probably for one more. Looks like D. Dukes, if you'd like to make a comment. I'm unmuting you now. There we go.
Yes, thank you so much, Danny. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I'm just coming on a little bit later. D. Dukes, I'm the president of the Winfield Community Neighborhood Association. Thanks to everyone and all of the questions, all of the comments was very, very valuable to me as a community leader. My quick question is, I know that you have these monthly meetings and I try my best to get on as often as possible. Do you ever go out between your meetings to the community organizations and speak on behalf of CPOC? Because I do think, as Leonette said, I think it's really important to get out amongst the communities, the leaders, to get this information out there. I do have experience with that forum, as I had a relative and I had to complete that form, and it was really easy to complete it. I've come up to the 2-year period where I have to update that form. So we want to be able to share that information with the communities that we're responsible for. So do you ever go out between your meetings and talk to the community on behalf of, their neighbors?
Yes,
Uh,
Ms. Dukes,
Hold
we
on one
do,
second. Let me answer this, Talia. Let me answer this. I apologize. Ms. Dukes, how you feeling today?
I'm good, thank you. How you doing, Hassan?
Pretty good. We run into each other often outside of these meetings. This isn't the first time we met. As you know, I'm the commissioner for the 19th district. For all those on this meeting, if you have a commissioner in your district that you can get in contact with, you can easily contact us. You can easily see us in the community. Call me, Ms. Dukes. Each one of our emails is on the website, right? We have that relationship we can build together. I can reach out to the staff of CPOC. Ms. Talia is amazing at helping organizing these things, ensuring that we come out. So if each one of the commissioners come from a separate district, police district in Philadelphia for a reason, please utilize us.
I will definitely do that. We have 2 meetings coming up. I will definitely do that. Thank you so much. It was good seeing you again. And thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, Ms. Dukes, we do go out into the community. One of the things that we're really excited about is that CPOC, as we're growing and expanding, we have more staff and we have a bigger capacity to be able to get out there and engage with the public. So if there is something that you have coming up in your area that you're seeing, please reach out to us. We would love to be there. We don't just necessarily want to come and set up a table, that's great too. But if there's, an agency that wants to learn more about the complaint process or what CPOC can do for them, we would really love to be able to come and talk to the people that you're connected with. So when we go ahead and we send out our follow-up email to everyone that attended, we're going to make sure we send out a list of our commissioners, their names, their districts, the contact information for the people at our office that handle outreach and policy and different things, so that if you have something coming up that you want to tell us about, or if there's a particular issue that you think we should be covering in some of these meetings, you can have some direct contact with us. So we make sure that we'll do that.
We had one last question, Talia. Becky, if you wanted to unmute, I was going to unmute you so you could ask. You were waiting patiently. I know we're at time, so if anyone has to leave, don't worry about it.
I see we're past time, so
no,
all
please.
good. I can just ask quickly. So I saw today that CPOC came out with that 1-page, like a 12-page explainer on the behavioral health unit. And I was curious to read it, and I was concerned to read it as well, because a lot of the language seemed to come directly from PPD rather than, it didn't seem like it was written from the perspective of citizens oversight. So I was just curious, how did CPOC come to the position of supporting the expansion of the behavioral health unit? How did CPOC decide that? On page 11, it said CPOC looks forward to seeing the positive impacts of the behavioral health unit and hopes to see the unit expand. So I was just curious about the process of how CPOC came to that support for the behavioral health unit and what the process was behind that. If it was CPOC staff, commissioners, what that looked like.
I could answer that question. I did write that explainer. Probably about a year ago, we were doing a project. Basically, one of the things that we do as oversight is do what's called, explainer pieces for various topics that people may, raise, that they may have an interest in learning more about what the PPD's specific responses will be for various situations that they may encounter. And so we'll put out explainer pieces. And so last year we had done one for just the overall crisis intervention response of PPD and DBH. We produced a long explainer kind of just detailing the CIT training process and, the PPD's response to individuals in crisis, and a lot of content in that revolved around like the 302 process, the involuntary commitment process. And through that project, one of the people that we were meeting with regularly for information from that was discussing the behavioral, and Aaron O'Donnell, So that's how we kind of learned about the behavioral health unit. And so we wanted to do an explainer to kind of follow up from the one that we put out last year as well. And so that's kind of how we got onto the project. As far as the information, a lot of the information does come directly from the PPD, being that, you know, it is their unit. So they kind of are the subject matter experts in what their capacity is for the unit itself. So yeah, I guess I hope that answers your question as best as possible.
Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, we are right at time. Thank you again to everyone for joining us this month. Thank you so much to Lieutenant Cassell, Aaron, Ms. Jenkins from Dispatch. Thank you so much for joining us and talking to us about some of the new processes that PPD is putting in place. Thank you to all our community members for your great questions. And I'll just give you a little bit of information about where we will be next if you are interested in seeing us. So on the 31st of this month, we are going to be hosting a movie night and a community discussion. It's going to take place at the Parkway Central Library, 1901 Vine Street. That's going to be Friday, March 31st from 5:30 to 8:30. We are going to be watching a film called The Picture Taker. This is a very, very interesting, engaging, and important film. It surrounds Ernest Withers, who was a prominent and famed civil rights photographer, who has a complex history because although he captured all of these amazing moments in civil rights, after his death, it was discovered that he was actually an FBI informant. So we are going to spend some time talking about policing, community police relations, and how surveillance and police informants have affected how the policing community work together. On April 4th, we are going to be having our commissioners' public meeting. That is going to be at 6 o'clock on Zoom. There'll be more information sent out about that. On that same day, CPOC, we are going to be at the Temple University Criminal Justice Center Career and Internship Fair, just getting our information out to some prospective interns, talking to some students about careers and oversight. That's going to be really exciting. And also on the 6th of April, we are going to be at a gun violence prevention fair and a flag football game that is going to be sponsored by the Juvenile Probation and Community Relations Unit. So those are a couple things we're going to be doing. And of course, I'm going to be reaching out or listening to hear from Ms. D. Dukes to tell us about something going on in your neighborhood that we'll be at next month as well. So please stay tuned for our email with any updates. And if anyone has any questions or any concerns in the meantime, you can reach out to us at cpoc@phila.gov or call our office at 215-685-0891.
And I just put in the chat our mailing list. Please sign up if you're already not on it. Thank you everyone so much for coming. And thank you again to our guest speakers. Hope everyone has a nice and safe night. Take care.